coffee cup. Let me turn on some lights. Yep.
Well, welcome, folks. This is the Wealth Curated podcast going full auto yet again. And our guest star, there he is. He came back. I thought he walked out on us. But the highly esteemed man of the moto art world, Mr. Paul d'Orleans. I'm talking to Paul from New Orleans. So there's that thread, but a lot of synergy you'll see in this podcast. We were just chatting, Paul, about our common backgrounds in the arts and the design world. And I was wrestling today. It's so daggum hot here. I was trying to decide if I was going to compete with the fashion, because I always see you in the threads and they're awesome. And I'm a fashion guy, but it's just too dang hot. So I went for the t-shirt today.
Well, it's easy to be into fashion in San Francisco because it's always so cold. So it's a wardrobe opportunity.
Yeah. My wife and I spent 3 years in the Laguna area till we moved back to New Orleans about 1.5 years ago, and we do miss the weather.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place.
That's why people come here until the fires, and then you find other sides of California.
Yeah. Well, look, you got your coffee. I got my coffee. I have my Evel Knievel signed coffee mug.
That's awesome.
I grew up in that era. You know, I'm a born in '68, so a kid of that era where, you know, bikes were romantic and trying to kill yourself on a bike equally romantic. And so we're going to share a lot of stories today. But for the listeners who don't know you, there's going to be a lot who do know you. But tell us who Paul d'Orleans is, what the Vintagent is about, and how you came to this world.
Yeah, so the Vintagent started out as a blog in 2006, and it was when blogs were really getting started, like getting a lot of traction. And it was basically the first old motorcycle blog. And as such, it got a lot of attention rapidly. And we were talking a moment ago about my previous career, which was as a decorative painter and muralist. And within about 4 years of me starting my blog, I basically gave up my previous career to pursue writing and more web work and other developments around kind of mostly the motorcycle industry. I mean, that's kind of what I've been focused on. But also, you know, I've written about a lot of other things. So that blog was a great entree to a lot of worlds of publishing and magazines and filmmaking. And so what do? I curate exhibits at museums. I've done 5 exhibits at the Peterson Museum now. I've done other exhibits at other museums in the country, looking to do even more internationally. I've published 8 books with various publishers, Gestalten and Moto Books, mostly. And I have a nonprofit called the Motor/Cycle Arts Foundation, which produces these exhibits. And we're currently developing a concept called Electric Revolution, which started as the world's first museum exhibit of electric vehicles, especially electric motorcycles, and is kind of becoming an alternative to the trade show concept for this new generation of vehicles.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's more about creating a culture around electric vehicles, because right now it's just kind of trade show stuff, you know.
Right.
We have over 100 years of competitions and, you know, events and demonstrations around internal combustion vehicles, but almost nothing around electric. So kind of promoting that side of things so that people have something to talk about, you know, besides, you know, range and batteries and things like that.
Well, fascinating stuff. And wow, we are kindred spirits in a lot of ways. I'm a writer and have published a number of books and been in the art world. And you know, my approach right now is a little more broad than motorcycles and moto art, though that's my passion. And I sort of sense, like you know, things are sort of, the gears are shifting toward that real focus. So it's interesting to have you at this time for a lot of those reasons. But we ran into you at the Peterson Electric Revolutionaries exhibit because we're there filming. I'm an executive producer as well, doing film work, and we're covering the Peterson for one of our Driven TV episodes but also the Electric Revolutionaries exhibition. And we have a feature on Curtis motorcycles, the Curtis One. And there's so much cool stuff in that space. But so you've told us a little bit about your background. I'll give you a little bit about my early background, what sort of set the hook for moto art for me. Then I want you to share your story. So, I grew up in just an auto focused family. My grandfather ran a Jag dealership for 40 years. He was the GM, died on the job, literally. And from the time, my earliest memories are being in the shop surrounded by XKEs and MGs and Triumphs and just dynamic, beautiful, poetic cars with a real story, a real narrative, right? And then, of course, he rode a motorcycle into work every day for a lot of years. He had Harleys, Triumphs. My uncles had Triumphs. I learned to ride on a Honda Trail 70. Interesting. There's a whole movement right now redoing Honda Trail 70s. Such cool stuff. So that's kind of my story. My first car was a Triumph Spitfire. My grandfather gave to me, fully restored, as a 16-year-old kid. And that was it. When that happens, the hook is set. So tell us how you actually came to motorcycles and this passion that you're pursuing.
Yeah, I came to motorcycle. I learned to ride when I was 15. I wanted to graduate early from high school. And so I'd been in this gifted program and I was getting credits for it. And I realized at one point that if I took like 3 night classes at the local community college, I could graduate a whole year early from high school. And I hated high school. So my mother loaned me $200 to buy a little Honda moped. And that started me off. I didn't really get into old motorcycles until after college. I was an art major as well as politics and environmental studies and agro design, and I did a lot of things. And I had a friend. We set up a printing press in my mother's basement in San Francisco, and we're printing books and punk show posters and things like that.
Cool.
And he had a BMW R50, like a 1951 or 2 R50 that he dragged from under a staircase. And he rode it everywhere, and I just loved that thing. So he let me ride it, and then he gave me this like a milk crate full of classic bike and classic motorcycle magazines. This was 1984. Wow. Those magazines had all been publishing for like 2-3 years at that point. And that was just like, I just say, it was like giving you crack, a pipe, and a match. It's like, right. I inhaled those magazines and I was completely hooked. So yeah, I came at motorcycles from an art background, and I started collecting old motorcycles. I've owned hundreds and kind of honed my collecting over the decades towards more competition or really rare motorcycles. And I was sourcing them from South America, Australia, Europe, England, all over the place. And so even before the internet really took off as a place to share antique vehicle passion, I was going around the world meeting people. And so I already had a bit of a reputation as someone who knew what they were doing, because I started collecting books because there was no internet in '84 to do this research. So I would literally go to every used bookstore in San Francisco just on rounds, like once a week, and buy every motorcycle book they had.
Wow.
And they were cheap. And now I've got thousands and thousands of motorcycle books, and I read them. So, and then I got invited to judge concours, and that led to me starting my blog in 2006. I was judging the Legend of the Motorcycle concours at the Ritz in Half Moon Bay, which is really a groundbreaking international. It was the first international all motorcycle concours d'elegance.
That's fantastic.
People literally, I met people from around the world, from, Miguel Galuzzi, designer from Ducati at the time, who did the Monster, to Oriol Bulto, whose family owned Bultaco. And I mean, so many people. And I started my blog then. I also met custom builders like Shinya Kimura. and Jesse James and people like that. And
Yeah.
it just launched my career, and because I started writing about all these things and all these people, and magazines like Psycho World started asking me to write articles, and that just sort of one thing led to another, let's say. And in 2010, I quit my previous career as a decorative painter, and I moved to Paris for a year and a half, so I couldn't do that work. It was kind of an enforced, let's say, focus on developing my craft as a writer, and really focused on writing magazine articles and books and things like that.
A fascinating story. So many segues there, and it's a lot of stuff we want to talk about. But one that jumps out at me, a lot of us guys who are in the bike world, and who are just, it's in our DNA to collect by nature, right? We appreciate the history and the art and the story. A lot of the wives who aren't there just don't get it, right? And so, you just want to go hang out with those people, and they think everybody who's in the bike world, it's got a chopper and a leather jacket, they're in a gang or whatever. But it's so much broader, right? The bike world is so diverse. I mean, and for the world that you and I sort of operate in, it really is art. And these guys who are crafting, it's high art. They're really passionate about producing essentially rolling sculptures, right? Tell us about that world.
Yeah, I really, I had no interest in custom motorcycles until 2006. And I was a judge at this Legend of the Motorcycle concourse, and they had a custom motorcycle class. They were the first concourse to include customs. And this was, 2006 was still the heyday of like the, Orange County choppers and all the TV customs and Jesse James and all that. And I had no interest in them at all. I thought they were really Baroque and really gauche, frankly, and like apex expressions of lowbrow culture. And it just wasn't my bag. But
Right.
there was Shinya Kimura, and he was, handcrafting these incredible wabi-sabi creations that were humble and related to these Triumph and Excelsior motors that he was using, and just completely different. And this was clearly an artist, and they were not flashy, but I just was moved by them. And so we talked. He actually let me ride one of his bikes, and I ended up writing about him, and it just kind of led to a whole new world. I also met Ian Barry from Falcon Motorcycles at the Legends, and started writing about his bikes, and I kind of embraced this movement of kind of a new culture of art/motorcycle, and led to I was a big contributor to Gestalten's series The Ride, which is an excellent, there's two books, The Ride and The Ride Second Gear. And I had an exhibition called Custom Revolution, my first at the Peterson in 2018, and we did our own book called Custom Revolution. That really sort of was the start of my kind of interaction of the art motorcycle thing. Although I'd been writing about, art movements like the Futurists, who were really the only modern art movement to incorporate motorcycles into their artwork.
Right. Fascinating little study. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of ended after that. It's like motorcycles were dynamism and motion and exciting, and the Italians got that, but really no one else took it up after that. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I write about that in some of my books, like The Chopper, the real story about what happened, how customized motorcycles, or motorcycles, as you say, became associated with black leather jackets and choppers.
Right.
Different scene, a whole cultural shift happened.
Yeah. It's such a diverse world. There's also an existential side to the motorcycle reality, right? You seem to write in similar ways and think in similar ways that I do in that regard, because when you get on a bike, and you have an appreciation for this work of art beneath you, this fascinating machine, just the slightest crack of that throttle, right? It does something to you existentially. For those moments you're engaged, it's like you are then directing the path, right? You're creating the adventure that unfolds next. When you lean into a curve, it's like a different existential reality that you're wrapped up in. And I think a lot of people miss that when they're just focused on the OC Chopper or the Jesse James, or not to diminish that, because it is a very diverse cultural reality. When you get, you can hop off a bike, an art bike, for example, right? And be talking to a guy who's just hopping off a chopper, and it's like you're part of the same world. But the existential part of it is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, motorcycling is a very complicated and very magical experience, and it's hard to. I mean, I have been asked to put that experience into words, in print, and that's a fabulous challenge. It's always required me to dig deep and to talk about, what is essentially a really visceral experience. I think that at its essence, what the appeal, what makes motorcycles special as opposed to cars, because of course in cars you have total agency as well. You can go where you want. You can't quite, steer off onto a footpath in a car as you can with a motorcycle, but
Right.
I think it's about vulnerability. That's the big difference. In a motorcycle, you're exposed. You are experiencing constantly changes in temperature, air pressure, smells, sensations, animals, cars. It's like there's this mix, a heady mix of danger and exhilaration that there is no other vehicle like it. You have that power in your right wrist, but it's so much more than that. It's about just kind of being out in the world, like having the landscape sweep across you, especially when you're out in nature. I think an urban ride is a little bit different, but, and as you mentioned, there is also, like, as with a lot of more, let's say, custom scenes, it's about presentation as well.
Yeah.
I think, this kind of trope of what I call the dark rider, like the menacing aspects. I mean, I actually trace that notion back to, I blame Jean Cocteau, the film director, because he included in his 1948 film, Orpheus. Death is this gorgeous woman who is chauffeured around in a Rolls Royce, but her henchmen are riding Indians, right? And when you hear the sound of a motorcycle coming in that film, you're going to die, because they're the agents of death. And I think that he really, before The Wild One or anything like that, he really planted the seed that a motorcyclist has this tinge of evil. And I think it goes even farther back, because he lived in occupied Paris in World War II. And the Nazis also used motorcycles very effectively as kind of tools of social control. It's like a tank is one thing, but a Nazi in a uniform on a motorcycle can go anywhere, and you never know when they're going to show up. So I think it was a particularly, like, a car is a presentation, but a guy on a motorcycle with a gun is another matter. So I think there's this thread that got picked up in The Wild One. The motorcyclist is tough guy and like troublemaker, that didn't really exist, before the war. Like, motorcycles were not presented this way. So I think there was some shift that happened. And so I think that, some people embraced that. It's kind of a power. It's like this dark power of intimidation that you can have, especially on a big, loud motorcycle. And some folks are into that. I'm not particularly into that, but I understand what that's about, So there are many, many threads of what makes motorcycles special and for whom,
So many fascinating paradoxes in this world of bikes, because you referenced the wars. We also know, and I forget the name or the the make of the bike, but the Allied forces had these little bikes that they would drop out of planes on
Yeah,
parachutes, right?
yeah.
Almost the size of a
Torquey
back.
Weld bikes and Royal
Yeah.
Enfield Flying Fleas. Yeah,
Yeah. And they'd
parents would
unfold
drop
them.
them.
Yeah. So, there's this good and evil battle that has always been there. And, here we are still, art bikes versus gang bikes or whatever, however you
Yeah.
want to reference them. Uh, so let's switch gears a little bit here, because the world of bikes right now, electric revolutionaries, for example, and the custom world. I know you were in the film Oil in the Blood not too long ago, which was an investigation of the custom bike world, which is so dadgum cool and so diverse.
Yeah.
And so I want to switch gears a bit and talk about where's the bike world going right now. The custom build world, the art bike world, has been exploding and getting more and more interesting. And here comes this new thread, the EV world. There's so many questions there, right? Is it going to be led by production bikes? Can production bikes actually create a compelling narrative, a story that people want to get interested in? Or are they just too blasé? Is the custom EV world going to lead the future and get more people in? So much to talk about there, but what are you seeing? I know you just curated at the Peterson Museum. What are your thoughts overall?
Yeah, I mean, the Electric Revolutionaries exhibit was a follow-on of my Electric Revolution exhibit of 2019, which was the first, electric motorcycle museum exhibit. And I was interested in it from just the point of view that there was this explosion of businesses like we haven't seen in 100 years, over 100 years. This like the turn of the 20th century, when there were 300 motorcycle manufacturers in the United States, and within 20 years it was down to 4.
Amazing. Yeah.
So we will see something like that. So we're in that early stage where it's relatively easy for a manufacturer to step into the game, and the licensing issues, since there's no EPA, the bar is very low. If it's got brakes and turn signals, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of just this explosion of manufacturers, small manufacturers. And then we see first Harley Davidson making a big bike, which was a bold move. And now Triumph is becoming the second major manufacturer to
TE1, yeah.
put out TE1 to put out a big bike. And it's a big risk for both of them, because I'll be completely honest, I don't think the allure of electric motorcycles right now is for traditional motorcyclists.
Yeah.
Because until batteries really change, you just can't get the range out of them.
Right.
But if range isn't an issue with let's say a smaller bike, what's fabulous about electric motorcycles is they appeal to non-motorcyclists in a way that internal combustion motorcycles never can.
Yeah.
Or in the way that scooters do, that are just twist and go, because there's no bar for entry. You sit on it, you twist the throttle, and away you go.
Yeah.
And the brakes are just like a bicycle, with 2 on the handlebar, no clutch, no gear shift. And interviewing small manufacturers like Sondors, they say something like 80% of their customers have never been on a motorcycle in their life. And they are explicitly targeting non-motorcyclists for this new genre. And I think that's really smart.
Yeah.
Some of those people will become interested in larger electric vehicles when they become a little bit more friendly. But the great appeal of electric motorcycles and electric cars is instant power.
Yeah.
You
Torque is amazing.
Yeah, even with a low power, basically a moped or a scooter, they are so quick and fun and quiet,
and smooth as butter.
They don't smell, they don't make a lot of noise. It's like the experience is like a magic carpet.
Yeah.
And it adds a whole other dimension. I remember having a conversation. I was riding on a vintage ride with Alan Stelberg from Revival Cycles, and I love doing engines off races. And I was we were both on Brough Superiors, and there's a huge incline from Lake Tahoe down into Nevada towards the town of Genoa. And I can't remember, it's like 15 miles. And we were just cruising downhill on these bluffs and it was totally quiet. And he looked at me and says, Paul, in a few years, this is what it's all going to be about. It's like, you are spot on, man. Silent running, just the wind and nature and that an added level of vulnerability,
Here's what's fascinating to me about that, because I'm a purist guy. I grew up in a garage with all those sounds and smells and those tangible feelings, and I've had the chance now to ride a number of electric bikes, including the Curtis One, and just did a couple of reviews on the Zero bikes. And for a guy who totally understands and gets that pressure within the purist motorcycle world, oh, don't ever do that, it's heresy. I'm telling you, it's an experience it's different, but equally as captivating.
Yeah.
Because when the sounds go away, the vibrations go away, all the action, goes away. It's like you flying across the earth and you're taking in everything around you. It's just very different, but very, very cool.
Yeah. It's a wholly different experience, and it's not one that I think traditional motorcyclists should be afraid of. What they should be afraid of is, hey, the earth is, the climate is changing because we've been burning fossil fuels for 100 odd years and burning coal and stuff. I mean, we have to take responsibility for the fact that things need to change, and we need to change them. We can blame legislation, but really things are changing for a very important reason. And so better to embrace the future. I love internal combustion motorcycles. I have a garage full. I've got 13 internal combustion bikes. I've got one cake in there too. They're completely different experiences. I love the fact that I can put 3.5 gallons of gas in my 65 Bonneville and go miles, and it's just blissful. It's blissful. And it's what I'm used to, and it's what I love. But I totally get that change is a coming. Don't blame the bikes.
What's your favorite bike in your collection? Is there a focus to the collection, or is it just eclectic?
Right now, it's mostly British. It's pretty eclectic. Yeah, I've got like a 1933 Brev Superior 1150, which is an exceptional road bike. I rode the same model across the United States, 2-up on the Cannonball in 2014. Wow. Cruising 65, 70 all day long, 2-up.
Awesome.
Kind of blew the mind of the riders on knuckleheads, when I twist the throttle and just pass them by 2-up going uphill.
Wow.
They were like, oh no.
That's
but
fantastic.
I have a couple of Triumphs, from the 60s. They're fab. They're so fun and easy. I have a lot of Velisets, mostly racers and production racers, Thruxtons and TTs.
Any sport bikes?
Those are sport bikes. I have real racing bikes. Like I have
modern, really.
Most modern bike I have is 1973.
Okay.
It's a Triumph TR5T.
Okay.
I have owned modern bikes and I've certainly ridden a lot, but bikes past a certain age, the era of plastic don't do much for me. Once the 80s hit and everything got covered up, the aesthetic was kind of lost. And what's happened with legislation is everything's had to get bigger because of noise legislation. The engines literally had to get bigger to dampen the sound of an engine, and the airboxes got huge and the exhaust got huge, and so the bikes got huge. And even the Scout is what, like 700 pounds. Most new bikes are 5, 6. I like a 300-pound motorcycle. That's right. Sounds like fun to me. Newer bikes have not really done it for me just because I like a lighter motorcycle.
That's been a deterrent, I think, to newcomers as well.
Exactly.
So one of the obstacles, and it's, it all comes down to the technology, the battery technology. One of the obstacles is, to this point, the EV bikes are so daggum heavy. But the ease of operation, makes up for it. So yeah, there's so many parts to the EV discussion which fascinate me because um, is the production company approach going to be the one that sort of juggles all the pieces properly and fits them together? Price, range, weight, all those factors we know that are going to be critical to success. And maybe battery becomes the most important factor because, you know, the range and the weight are going to be really important. But, you know, if we get over those two hurdles, it may broaden, you know, the industry quite a bit.
Well, it's going to have to, because, you know, in Europe, you're not going to be able to ride your gas bike, at least in cities anymore. It's basically already there, but within a few years, you know, so they will lead the charge because
And seat height's going to be important.
pressing issue. Well, what, you know, every manufacturer of e-bikes has asked me the same questions. And well, Paul, what's gonna tip the scales? What's gonna take? And I just say, well, legislation, man. People are going to be forced into it. That's what happened in China. Small internal combustion vehicles were outlawed, and now they are, you know, tens of millions of electric scooters and bicycles and mopeds and things there. You know, it's already there, and it's gonna be here. I mean, we already have millions of, you know, stand-up scooters and rideshare electric bikes in the United States. When I walk around San Francisco, they're everywhere. So they will be in every city first, and then we'll see about the bigger bikes. Yeah, I think that is 100% about battery. It's 100%.
Yeah.
Because they're just too big and heavy and too expensive. And, you know, they're going to be for people who are hardcore, and it won't be, it'll take a while for the non-riders to make that switch, or even the traditional riders, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
to a larger electric bike. But, you know, there are already electric sport bikes, and Energica makes an amazing bike.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hello, still, I believe the fastest production motorcycle in the world for the last 6 years is Lightning.
The Lightning, you know, right?
218 miles an hour. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I don't understand why every president we've had since
it's Moto GP speed there.
The fastest motorcycle in the world is made in America. You know, nobody's talking about this. That's funny.
Of course, you get up to speed on that. Your range is about 4 blocks, but yeah,
it's true. But also
Ducati is now developing one. Did you see that?
Yeah, they are developing it. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen pictures. I think Triumph will get to the market first.
Yeah.
Ducati will be third. I haven't seen anything from BMW, Moto Guzzi, you know, nothing, or Indian. But Indian, Polaris owns Bramo and has for years, you know, 10 years. Why they're not doing anything, I don't know. There are rumors that maybe they are developing something. I'm friends with Ola Stenegard, who's the chief of design at India, and he says, "We'll see."
Yeah,
he can't talk.
You know, it's interesting. It seemed like this massive ramping up of EV right prior to COVID, and then you got all the problems we know that have been going on with shipping and sourcing and all that, and we're starting to see an attempt to ramp up again. I'm curious to see. There's a lot of great boutique EV guys that you and I are familiar with, from Curtis and Eccles and others, and there's some really compelling stuff visually. And then you got guys getting in, like you referenced, Triumph.
Yep.
Who gets there first, and can the big producers give us a story bike that's has the stuff we want in a bike, or is it strictly going to be the boutique guys who unfortunately can't mass produce them, so they're one-offs? You got to get in line. It's going to take months and months. We're at an interesting place. What about the custom world, right? So do you think some of those custom builders that you and I know, Max and others who've just done the IC bikes, do you see them coming over and maybe starting to enter the customized EV space?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you do see guys like Hugo Eccles with Untitled Motorcycles, you know, producing brilliant custom EVs. Our Electric Revolution had a bunch. Walt Siegel taking an Alta, just making a beautiful diamond hard design out of an Alta, you know, and also DeBolix Engineering in Britain took an Energica and made a just amazing bike that we had in our Electric Revolution show. Yeah, the custom scene is embracing them because actually they're pretty easy to work with. You know,
Yeah.
the technology is so simple, and you have free reign. No gas tank, no exhaust, just shape. Yeah.
But it's fascinating, and hope we can talk more. I feel like we could talk for hours. So much to talk about. But tell us how people can find you and learn more about you.
Yeah, it's thevintagent.com.
Vintagent.com.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to find me. Or on Instagram, The Vintagent, Facebook, The Vintagent. I'm all over the place.
Awesome. Yeah, well, it's fascinating. I appreciate your time. Our site is wealthcurated.com. Lots of cool, rare stuff, but we love the bikes. That's our favorite sector. And we're going to be spending more and more time there.
Talk about motorcycle investments, but that's another issue, another talk.
We need to have that discussion.